Snow fell the way secrets do, softly at first, then all at once, until the world was hushed beneath its weight. Frost Creek looked smaller in winter, as if the cold pressed the buildings inward, forcing folks closer to their own shadows. I remember that morning because the sky had the color of old tin, and the wind moved low along the street, worrying at hems and broken boards. That was when I heard the boy's voice. Not loud, not begging, just a whisper, thin as breath against the cold. "Mama can't walk today." Jonah Holloway stood beside the boarding house steps, his boots 2 sizes too big and tied with fraying twine. His hand was wrapped around his mother's sleeve, as if he were afraid she might slip away into the snow if he let go. Eliza May Holloway sat slumped on the lowest step, her back against the rail, her breath shallow and uneven. One leg lay useless beneath her skirt, swollen and stiff, the other trembling with the effort of holding her upright. Her cheeks were pale, nearly the same color as the snow collecting in the folds of her coat. People passed them. Boots crunched. A wagon rattled by. Someone coughed behind a scarf and turned their face away. In Frost Creek, winter had a way of teaching folks to look past what hurt too much to fix. The boarding house door opened just long enough for Mrs. Wilkes to peer out, her eyes sharp and measuring. She took in Eliza's position, the boy's thin frame, the dusting of snow already settling on their shoulders. "I told you," she said, her voice dry as old paper. "No pay, no room. I can't have sickness under my roof." The door closed again with a finality that echoed louder than the words. Eliza did not argue. She only lowered her eyes, shame moving across her face like a slow shadow. Once, she had been the kind of woman who met the world straight on. Loss had bent her, illness had broken her, and the town had finished the work by turning its back. Jonah felt her body sag and tightened his grip, setting his jaw the way men do when they decide not to cry. The wind cut sharper then, threading through Jonah's coat and finding the places where buttons were missing. He leaned closer to his mother, trying to give warmth he did not have. "It's all right," he said, though it clearly was not. "We'll rest a minute." Across the street, a man stood half-hidden beside the general store, one shoulder pressed to the wall. Caleb Rourke had been in Frost Creek long enough to be known, though not well. Folks said he was quiet because he had nothing good to say, or because he'd seen too much and didn't care to share it. He wore winter like it belonged to him, coat heavy, hat pulled low, gloves scarred and mended. His eyes lingered on the woman and child longer than politeness allowed, then shifted away, as if he'd been caught looking at something private. Caleb told himself it wasn't his concern. Frost Creek was full of stories like theirs, and he had learned the hard way that stepping into another person's suffering often only dragged your own back into the light. He turned, took 2 steps through the snow, then stopped. Something tugged at him, not urgency, but a steady, unwelcome pull. He glanced back. Eliza tried to stand. She braced one hand on the railing, the other on Jonah's shoulder, and pushed. Pain flared across her face, sharp and undeniable. Her leg buckled, and she would have fallen if Jonah hadn't taken the weight, small body straining under the sudden load. They went down together, slow and awkward, ending with Eliza half on the snow, half on the step, her breath tearing out of her. That sound, half pain, half apology, cut through Caleb like a blade. He crossed the street without thinking, boots sinking deep. He knelt beside her, the cold seeping through his coat. "Easy," he said, surprised at how rough his voice sounded. He checked her pulse with practiced fingers, felt the fever there, the exhaustion. He shrugged out of his coat and draped it over her shoulders, tucking it close the way one does with something precious and breakable. Eliza looked up at him, fear flickering first, then confusion. "Sir, you don't have to." "I know," he said, already lifting her. She weighed less than she should have, all angles and fragile bones. Jonah gasped, then hurried to Caleb's side, his hand clutching the man's sleeve as if anchoring himself to a miracle. Caleb carried them through town, without looking at anyone. Windows watched. Curtains shifted. Whispers followed like drifting snow. He felt every stare, but kept his eyes on the path ahead, on the place where the road dipped and rose, on the steady rhythm of putting one foot in front of the other. Eliza's head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. Jonah trotted beside him, stumbling once, then righting himself with stubborn determination. The cabin sat at the edge of Frost Creek, where the trees thickened and the world grew quieter. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin but promising. Inside, the air smelled of pine resin and old coffee grounds. Caleb set Eliza down on the narrow bed near the fire, stoked the coals until warmth spread through the room. Jonah hovered, eyes wide, until Caleb pressed a mug of broth into his hands. "Slow," he said. "It's hot." Eliza woke long enough to see the firelight and the man moving carefully about the room. Her shoulders eased, just a little. Safety, she thought, was sometimes nothing more than being warm and not alone. She slept again, deeper this time, while outside the snow continued its quiet work, sealing the cabin off from the rest of the world. Caleb sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a cooling cup, listening to the wind. He told himself this was temporary. Shelter, nothing more. Yet when Jonah finally slept on the pallet near his mother, Caleb added another log to the fire, the gesture small but deliberate. Outside, Frost Creek lay buried and watchful, and something long dormant in Caleb Rourke stirred, uneasy but alive, as the night stretched on. Morning arrived quietly, as if the storm itself had decided not to disturb what it had spared. Pale light slipped through the cabin window, settling on Eliza's face with a gentleness she had not known in months. She woke expecting pain, the familiar sharp reminder that her body no longer obeyed her, but found instead a dull ache softened by warmth. The fire still breathed low and steady. Someone had tended it through the night. Caleb sat at the table, boots off, socks drying near the hearth. He looked up when she stirred, then away again, giving her the dignity of waking without an audience. "There's tea," he said, "if your stomach can take it." She nodded, emotion tightening her throat. Gratitude felt too heavy to voice just yet. Jonah slept curled on his side, his hand tucked beneath his cheek. The lines of worry finally eased from his brow. Eliza watched him breathe and felt something unfamiliar unfold in her chest, a fragile hope, thin as ice, but holding. The days that followed moved with the patience of snowmelt. Caleb never asked questions he wasn't ready to hear the answers to. He brought water warmed on the stove, rubbed salve into Eliza's swollen leg with careful hands, always pausing if her breath hitched. When he chopped wood outside, Jonah sat on the steps and listened to the rhythm of the axe, counting each strike as if it were a promise. At night, Caleb left a lantern burning low, its light a quiet assurance that the dark would not take them by surprise. Frost Creek did not forget them. Mrs. Wilkes's voice carried on the wind one afternoon when Caleb ventured into town for supplies. She spoke of decency and reputation, of kindness wasted on those who could not repay it. Sheriff Pike offered a warning disguised as concern, telling Caleb that people noticed things, that misunderstandings grew teeth in winter. Caleb listened, thanked him, and walked away without defending himself. He had learned that some truths lost their power when left unspoken. Eliza heard the murmurs anyway. Shame returned like an old ache, settling deep. One evening, as Caleb cleaned his tools by the fire, she pushed herself upright, her jaw set. "We can't stay," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "You've done enough." Caleb met her gaze, saw the fear beneath the resolve. He helped her pack what little they had, his movements unhurried, respectful. When Jonah began to cry, Caleb crouched beside him and pressed his forehead briefly to the boy's. "Sometimes leaving is just another kind of strength," he said, though his chest felt hollow as he spoke. The storm came before they could go. Wind howled through the trees, snow slamming against the cabin walls. The roof groaned under the weight. Eliza tried to stand and fell, pain stealing her breath. Caleb was there in an instant, lifting her as he had before, but this time he did not turn toward the door. He carried her back to the bed, his arm steady, his decision made without words. The night stretched long and loud. Jonah prayed in whispers. Caleb held Eliza's hand through the worst of it, his thumb tracing slow circles that anchored her to the present. When the storm finally spent itself, silence fell like a benediction. Eliza woke to stillness and to the knowledge that something had shifted. She spoke then, not of gratitude, but of loss, of the husband winter had taken, of the town that had taught her to disappear. Caleb listened, his own past pressing close, and for the first time he let it sit between them. He did not promise anything. He only stayed. When the snow cleared, Frost Creek saw them together. Eliza walked, halting but upright, Jonah's laughter ringing ahead of them. Whispers faded. Some doors opened. Others did not matter. I tell you this because winters still come, and people still fall quiet when faced with another's need. Remember that dignity is often carried, not declared, and that small acts of grace can change the shape of a life. If this story warmed you, stay with us, subscribe, and let these old tales find you when the world feels cold again.